The AFP is reporting that some gynecologists are arguing that Western nations should allow some minor and moderate forms of female genital mutilation. They say some Western states should legally permit immigrant communities to surgically nick young girls' vaginas as an alternative to genital mutilation. A pair of U.S. gynecologists argued in a hotly challenged paper on Tuesday. Such a compromise could allow groups to honor cultural or religious prescripts while saving millions of girls from invasive and disfiguring genital slashing practiced in some African and Middle Eastern cultures. The two doctors stated in the Journal of Medical Ethics. Let me give you more of their direct quotes here. They say, "We are not arguing that any procedure on the female genitalia is desirable. Rather, we only argue that certain procedures ought to be tolerated by liberal societies which have outlawed such practices but host immigrants for whom it is part of their culture." So they go on to propose different categories of FGM. They say the higher categories that affect sexual gratification should be outlawed, so the most barbaric should be outlawed. But the lower ones shouldn't be. They say, quote, "Category 1 would entail procedures with no long-lasting effect on the appearance or function of the genitalia, such as a small nick in the skin. Procedures under Category 2 could include removing the hood or skin fold covering the clitoris or trimming the labia. The first two categories, they say, should be reclassified as female genital alteration rather than genital mutilation. They say these procedures are equivalent or less extensive than orthodontics or breast implantation." My response to this is no, because there's consent when you talk about, wearing braces and getting your teeth straightened. You do have a choice, and there's consent when you decide whether or not you want fake tits. They're saying, no, with female genital mutilation, there's no consent, but still maybe allow it because, hey, be tolerant of another culture. But what if that culture is being intolerant of the little girls when they genitally mutilate them without giving them a choice? Aren't they the ones being intolerant? Not us saying, hey, don't do that? No, the logic of this is absolutely fucking maddening. And I should give you some more here. They say, according to the UN, at least 200 million girls and women alive today have been subjected to FGM. Some 44 million aged 14 and younger. In the 30 countries where the practice is most widespread, the majority were cut before their 5th birthday. So again, this isn't a question of being liberal and tolerant. This is gynecologists saying, let's be tolerant of intolerance, in the sense that, if you're doing FGM, your culture is being intolerant towards the little girls when you're not giving them a choice and you're fucking genitally mutilating them. And they say, well, look, just a little nick is... No, you're still cutting the genitals of a little kid. It's not as bad as the most barbaric version, but it's still wrong. And there's one point that's worthy of mentioning here, though. They say, efforts to enforce an outright ban on female genital mutilation have often had the opposite effect, driving the practice underground and putting women at even greater risk. So that's a fair point. I don't know the data on that. Perhaps that's true. But if that is true, what I would say is the answer to that is just widespread education from a young age where you convince people, hey, look, this is wrong. Here's why it's wrong. It's effectively torture and you're torturing a little kid. You shouldn't do that in any way, shape, or form. So the answer is to de-brainwash, not to say, throw your hands up in the air and say, well, it is what it is, and we're just relegated to doing this forever. No, cultures and customs come and go over the years. It's just a matter of how you try to influence them and in what direction you try to take them. And if you try to de-brainwash people on this, eventually it'll go away. I feel like they're trying to make the argument similar to the drug war argument, where we say, hey, the drug war literally made more drugs available. And it only makes the drug cartels worse. There's a problem with that, though, making the comparison, because when you talk about drugs, there's something innately and inherently appealing about them. It gives you a rush of happiness chemicals, depending on what drug you're talking about. It either gives you a relaxed feeling or a really energetic and happy feeling. So that's something that is always going to have a natural market for drugs and intoxicants. Always. Throughout human history, it's been there. It's going to stay there forever. Genitally mutilating little girls' vaginas there's not a natural market for that. There's nothing innate about that that's like, well, that's obviously the way to go. No, not at all. So that is possible to de-brainwash people from that. You're not going to tell people to educate them to say, oh, all substances are bad, and that's the end of the conversation. No, they know if they've ever had coffee or a sip of alcohol, they know that's not necessarily true. So there's always a natural market for that. There's not a natural market for mutilating vaginas, okay? So I have to say, my takeaway from this is, people often talk about this thing called the regressive left, where the argument is, hey, the regressive left are liberals who will side with intolerance and bigotry if the bigotry and the intolerance is perpetrated by a culture of the other. So if it's a minority community, that within the minority community there's some customs or cultures that are bigoted or right-wing in nature, it's liberals who say, who are you to judge? They're not in your culture, so step aside and let them do whatever they want. I do think the term regressive left is massively overused, and it's applied as like anybody who slightly disagrees with me, or if you happen to believe in Palestinian rights, you're regressive, which I think is stupid and wrong. But is it a real thing? I'd say yeah, and I'd say this is an example of it right here. If you're arguing in the name of cultural sensitivity to allow minor genital mutilation of girls, yeah, that's regressive. You're saying, I'm in favor of right-wing, stupid ideas if the idea is from a culture that's not mine. Because imagine if Republicans in the U.S. said, we're going to do female genital mutilation. Would these gynecologists write a paper saying, well, come on now, we got to be tolerant of their intolerance and their, insistence on genitally mutilating little girls. We got to be tolerant of that, so let them do it. No, they'd be like, are you fucking stupid? No, we don't do that. No, we don't do that. So, that is, in my view, something that you can call regressive when you look at something like this. And the final thing I want to point out here is, let's also not just brush under the rug and pretend like, male genital mutilation, circumcision, is cool. And I love the people who, some people vehemently disagree with me on this, and they say, look, the science says it's okay. Dude, I've seen the science. I've read over it. Of course I have. And my takeaway is that not that convincing. Because their arguments are, hey, we can reduce the rates of HIV and sexually transmitted diseases by whatever percent. Let's make up a percent. 32%. Ha! How about that? There's no reason not to circumcise. Decreases STD rates. What's the rebuttal to that? Jackass, if you totally cut off your dick and balls, you can decrease STD rates to 0. If you're abstinent, you can decrease STD rates to 0. That doesn't mean you should do it. That's not an argument. Hey, if you genitally mutilate yourself, you might not get this, you get this disease 4% less of the time. Who gives a fuck? I still want my dick intact. It is male genital mutilation. It is wrong. And it is there is a little bit of hypocrisy in the West in the sense that we say, female genital mutilation, barbarians, you're so evil, you're so wrong in these primitive cultures. But male genital mutilation, totally cool. Totally different. Look, guys, don't get me wrong. Is it different? It is different because it's literally one's a penis, one's a vagina, and it's different in the way that you do the procedures, so on and so forth. I don't deny for a second that it's much more damaging and much more invasive when you do it to women. But I think it's still wrong when you do it to men. Look, I'm circumcised, but I've come to the conclusion and the realization that my parents were just brainwashed by their culture and they thought, okay, it's the right thing to do. No, it's not the right thing to do. Don't cut off the tip of your baby's dick. Okay? And it also started with religion. Let's remember that. People love to do the after the fact rationalizations where they do studies and they're like, oh no, totally, this was super scientific and it's the right thing to do. Wait a second. Where did it begin? Where did it begin? It began with religion. And then the bullshit rationalized studies came after the fact. They say, yeah, no, totally scientific reason to do it. Who was the first person to do it? Like, okay, look, I want to stop the spread of various STDs, and I think that this is going to help with the cleanliness of the people in the village. No, it's religious lunatics. Like, hey, and part of our ritual is saw off the fucking tip of the baby dick. If you fell for it, you're a brainwashed fool, okay? I'm just going to call it what it is. So I'm a little worked up over this, if you can't tell. I'm against genital mutilation kind of across the board here. And no, in the name of liberalism, you don't tolerate a little bit of female genital mutilation. That's stupid.